So tonight we will continue learning about different missions and missionaries that we get to support, that our offerings make a difference in their work and in their lives. And I'm looking forward to the missionaries that we will hear about tonight. I'll have some videos to play later that show the results of their good work. But as we begin our lesson right now, I want you to pay close attention to the next few words that I will say, because they're really important. Okay? Ahojte, dobry večer, som rád, že som tu. Ako sa máte dnes? Ako sa máte? Čo? Čo? Nehovoríte po slovinsky? Nehovoríte? Ale kde sú toalety? Prosím? Ale potrebujem toalety. Prosím. You all were no help. No help. Oh my goodness. Well, okay, what did you think while I was just talking right now? Not in nonsense, but in the Slovak language. What did you think while I was talking?
I don't know what language it is. I don't know what you're saying in that language.
Yeah. You certainly couldn't do what I needed you to do. I was asking for the bathroom. I said I really needed. I said, please. Okay, so you picked up a little bit. Maybe you could saw that I was in great need, perhaps. But you didn't know what I was saying. Okay, caught a little bit. Yeah. Maybe I was saying real words. Maybe. Well, yes. So those were all real words. That's the Slovak language. And imagine feeling that sense of not being able to understand something that is really important that someone is saying. Imagine feeling that and hearing that all the time. You know that there's something important they're trying to say. You need to hear it, or maybe you need to read it. Something you really need to figure out, but you just can't do it. And how frustrating that would be. Well, if you remember 2 weeks ago, we talked about missionaries in a missionary center in Bucharest, Romania, that helps minister to the Roma people in Romania. Also, the Roma people, that ethnic group, are in many other places, especially around Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, but in other countries as well. And just like we heard about their struggles in Romania, they also face very similar struggles in other countries too. I can't remember if we did like a quick overview 2 weeks ago of the Roma people, but as an ethnic group, they came originally from India and migrated to Europe about 800 years ago. So it's not like they are recent migrants. They have been there for a while. They're not newcomers. 800 years is a long time. However, they have always been discriminated against ever since they arrived 800 years ago, because their skin is a little darker complexion, having come from India. And as we know from almost every country's terrible racist history, those with darker skin tend to get discriminated against. And even today, the Roma people are still discriminated against. The old term to refer to them that everyone would have been familiar with was gypsy. And if you've heard the word or the label gypsy, that's this ethnic group, the Roma people, that it's talking about. And the word gypsy comes from the Old English word for Egyptian, because they thought, well, maybe these folks with the darker skin tone, they kind of look like they are Egyptian. So gypsy was the label that was created. But they're not Egyptian originally. So Roma, or Romani, sometimes you might hear it, is the title that they use. And tonight we're going to talk about the missionaries Dianne and Shane McNary. They are based in Slovakia. That's why I was talking Slovak earlier. They are based in the city of Poprad, Slovakia, and they also minister and work with the Roma people in the Czech Republic, the neighboring Czech Republic as well. When Roma children are allowed into school in Slovakia, which is not all the time. Sometimes they are not allowed. They often don't know how to speak the native Slovak language. So they would have felt things like you felt when I was really, well, first I said, hello, it's nice to be here. And I said, how are you all today? But you didn't answer. And so I asked again, and I said, what, you don't speak Slovak? And you didn't say anything. And then I said, well, I really need to use the bathroom. Come on. And still no one helped. Well, when Roma kids, if they are allowed into Slovak schools, they often do not know the Slovak language because Roma have their own language, and because they've been so segregated over the centuries, their families have kept using their language. So by the third grade, if a Roma child is still in school in the third grade, they might be placed in special education classes, even though they don't have any developmental challenges. Everything is perfectly fine, but no one cares enough to try and help either teach them in their native language or help them learn Slovak so that they can participate and learn the lessons. If they do start trying to learn some things at school and they go back home and their parents can't help them with the lessons because the parents don't know enough of Slovak to help them with their homework either. Now, some schools in Slovakia are trying to be progressive and to help Roma children and children of other ethnic groups. So they're trying to integrate more in their schools and trying to do a better job of including Roma children. But a trend that also happened in our country during the civil rights era, when those kids with that darker skin tone came into the schools, a lot of the Slovak parents will pull their white children out of the schools and find somewhere else for them to go. It's a hard place for Roma to live, whether it's Slovakia or all over Eastern Europe. But Dianne and Shane McNary, our missionaries, they're trying to provide welcome and hospitality and love for all people. And so where they are in Slovakia, it's the Roma people that need it the most. What's neat is that Dianne and Shane, being Americans, they are outsiders amongst Slovak people and also amongst Roma people. So they're outsiders to both, and they've been able to make friends with people from both communities and then help build bridges between the two. The different kinds of work that Dianne and Shane McNary offer, they offer weekly Bible studies for Slovaks and for Roma, especially for Roma people to learn the Bible, to have a chance to understand what it says, what the gospel means for them. Dianne and Shane have helped to start churches for the Roma community, and they will lead worship in Slovak churches as well. Education is a big part of their ministry, since we talked about this 2 weeks ago with Project Ruth in Bucharest, that if you can really start early with kids to give them a good education, that can help Roma families change their lives, improve, hopefully change the stereotype that other Europeans have about them. The Roma are seen as dumb and unteachable, so why waste your time trying to teach them? You definitely don't want them in your school, in your class. They'll just drag everything down. They're really seen as less than real humans, just kind of one step below the other kids, which is really, really sad. Does anyone know what the word marginalized means? Have you ever heard the word marginalized? I was going to throw that out there, but I wanted to make sure it's kind of a vocab word. What does the word marginalized mean if somebody has been marginalized? You might give a working definition for us.
On the edge. Not in the mainstream.
On the edge, not in the mainstream. Yeah, literally in the margins of society. Yes. And in Eastern Europe, the Roma are truly kept out, pushed out onto the margins of society and left there, and they are uncared for out there in the margins of society. Sometimes it is physically, literally, in the margins of a city, and there might be like a Roma encampment kind of right outside the city, And I got to go to Slovakia on a mission trip 20 or so years ago, and that was the case. And we worked in cities with Slovak Baptists, and it was great. And we'd kind of ask questions. Tell us about, what's over there, what's over there. And lovely, lovely people were our Slovak brothers and sisters. But when they would talk about the Roma, they'd say, oh, you don't want to go over there. That it's the dangerous part of town. That's the Roma part of town. It's dirty. Stay away. You don't want to go anywhere near there. And you could just tell that part on the outside of the city was literally people in the margins, and it was just kind of heartbreaking to learn and see that. So, Dianne Shane McNary seriously want to follow Jesus with their whole lives. That's why they give their lives to the mission field. And they read and have seen that the example of Jesus was all the time going to people who were left out on the margins of society and uncared for. Think about lepers who couldn't go into town, prostitutes who were shunned, tax collectors who were stereotyped as well, foreigners, all those people. Those were the people that Jesus would make it a point to step out and make sure they knew they were loved and that God's grace was offered to them and they were offered healing and welcome. So, Jesus sought out and taught and served and loved those people who were on the margins, and Shane and Dianne McNary want to do that too. They want to follow Jesus' example today. And so they are trying to reach the Roma people on the margins there in Slovakia and show them that they are valued and help them get what they need in order to have abundant life. So I've got 2 really short videos. They're about 1.5 minutes each, and they are interviews with 2 people who have been blessed by the ministry to the Roma there in Slovakia. And so one video is one lady, another video is a man, and they're speaking in Slovak and or Roma, so there'll be subtitles. So if you see you might need to get a little closer, that's okay. I'll turn the lights off and then I'll start the video.
Ja som chodila na strednú školu v Kežmarku, to je môj kraj, kde som existovala, žila, pod Vysokými Tatrami. Bola som jediná Rómka. Budovala, tak to bolo obdobie socializmu. Samozrejme, Rómovia počas socializmu neexistovali. Rómsky sme nesmeli rozprávať v škole. V 78. roku som išla na kopanie schodov návod, som išla celosvetový kongres Rómov do Ženevy. A tam som sa stretla s Rómami skoro z celého sveta. V tejto chvíli neviem na to názov slovo. Zem, indickú zem. A povedali, toto je taká zem. A som bola vtedy tak šokovaná z toho, že čo? Keď prišla vlastne tá nežná revolúcia a pád komunizmu, my sme boli vlastne prví na Slovensku, ktorý predmet rómsky jazyk dostal do vzdelávacieho systému a naše školy majú predmet rómsky jazyk a rómske reálie. Hneď od samého začiatku sa nás kontaktovali priatelia z Ameriky, z organizácie CBF, a oni nám ponúkli práve tú pomoc, ktorú sme hľadali na Slovensku. Ako keby sme sa čudovali, že tak ďaleko od Slovenska existujú ľudia, existujú organizácie, ktorým záleží na tom, aby Rómovia na Slovensku sa vzdelali.
She didn't know people existed that cared about the Roma. Isn't that something? And now she does.
Volám sa Julius Pechár, som asistentem sociálneho pracovníka v Cíke Cerovce. Vždycky sa chcem naučiť hlavne kvôli tomu, lebo sa zúčastním rôznych medzinárodných workshopov a konferencií, kde nás za veľmi potreba, aby som sa mohol dohodnúť s tými ostatnými participantmi. Takže ja pracujem vlastne hlavne pretože naozaj v rómskych osadách, keď sa že veľa Rómov neovláda dobre slovenský jazyk, ale keď mal zvyšný celý život na Slovensku, naozaj, že tam naozaj sútlujem tlmočníkov proste. Ľudia sú vďační za to, že im prečítate nejaký papier, že oni zrazu rozumejú tomu papieru, tomu nejakému dokalu. Znamená, že naozaj máme súvedomie, že bez vzdelania jednoducho nebudú mať možnosť žiť kvalitný svoj život. A títo mladí ľudia si to uvedomujú na doba, že ešte viac. Mladí ľudia chcú študovať, chcú byť úspešnejšie ako ich rodičia, nechcú byť v chudobe a jednoducho prišli na to, že iba cez vzdelanie budú schopní obhajovať sa, získať prácu, ale práve, že majú vieru a vďaka viere pomáhajú jeden druhému, milujú seba samého ako blížneho svojho.
I think that's great. Knowing that we get to be a part of that awesome work. So, what kind of difference did you hear being made? What difference are they making?
They're being educated, and that's gonna be the possibility of jobs and a better quality life.
We know that somebody cares about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody out there cares about them. Yeah.
Traditionally, what is the faith background for Roma people?
That's a really good question. It seems that the default is Catholic. I wonder how serious and committed they might be if they don't have a strong enough, like, kind of civil infrastructure to help fund and maintain churches and religious, facilities and that kind of thing. I think I read that by default more might be Catholic than other religions. But I would suspect, since they've kind of existed as a migrant population for 800 years in the same places, which is weird, that they would be very open and receptive to, as a mission field, for anyone to show love and start a Bible study and start a church. But that's a good question. Don't quote me on that all the way, but I think that's what I read. Yeah. Well, before we conclude tonight, let's read a story of an example of Jesus, as Jesus tells a story of someone else who's trying to do something similar. So I'm going to read from Luke chapter 14 tonight. In Luke chapter 14, in the middle of this chapter, Jesus has been invited to a banquet, a fancy soiree perhaps. And as he often does, he challenges people's assumptions with the words that he says and the stories that he tells. So, I'm going to read from Luke chapter 14, verses 16 through 25. Jesus said, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I have just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'Oh, I had just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' Still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you ordered has been done, but there is still room.' Then the master told his servants, 'Go out to the roads and country lanes and make them come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those men who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. So, why do you think the first group of people were so quick to say no? You say fear? Someone said fear? Okay. We know what the excuse they gave was, as is the case with often the reasons we might share sometimes. Perhaps it was true, perhaps it wasn't. So whether it was or wasn't, what do you think some of the real reasons or their motivations for saying no were?
I mean, they didn't feel comfortable in this man's
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. They must not have been interested enough to prioritize going to this master's banquet. Because if something is really, really important to you, doesn't matter how many oxen you just bought, you're gonna be there. Like if your child is having surgery, it doesn't matter if you need to plow your field or not, you're gonna be there, you know what I mean? So if it was a priority, they would have made it a point to come. So they must not be interested in what this master has to share in the setting, in the house, maybe the vibe. Maybe they know what this master's like and they're not into that. Maybe they know this is a guy who would welcome the poor, the blind, the lame. Maybe he has a track record of doing that. Any wealthy person at the time who would let those folks be invited, maybe it's not the first time this has happened. Yeah. So maybe the other fancy folks in the area were interested in the kind of banquet this master was going to have. So, fortunately, at the end of the story, who are the kind of folks that do accept the invitation?
Those less esteemed.
Mm-hmm. Those who were considered less than, not as good.
Marginalized.
Marginalized, yeah, the people that are left out and literally wherever they were physically and literally, it was the highways and the hedges, the alleyways, out somewhere. The servant has to go find them. They're not in the city center, on the high street, where all the fancy shops are, where all the mansions are. Like, the servant has to go find them. They are on the margins, socially and literally. So this master and the servant who who extends the master's invitation shows amazing hospitality. The people who heard the story would have thought, that's crazy hospitality. That's ridiculous hospitality. Can't believe that master would do that. But, of course, we know that in Jesus' stories, the master is God. So how is showing hospitality then, today, here, Slovakia, how is hospitality a way of showing the love of God? How does hospitality communicate God's love?
Accepting everybody, diversity.
Yeah. That all are welcome.
No one's better than another person.
Oh, yes. There's no favoritism. That reminds me of the verse in James. That we shouldn't show favoritism either way, to the wealthy or the poor, or the one who comes in fancy dress. We shouldn't show favoritism. Yes, all are welcome. Yeah.
It reminds me of our church, because whoever would open the door and come in, we would welcome them.
Yeah.
We just don't have enough people coming in. But we would welcome them.
I wonder if that makes this story a little more powerful, because maybe if there's some church that is exploding with money and people, okay, I don't want to say anything disparaging or condescending, but there could be a temptation for that kind of church to have a sense of better than, or a type of people, or, oh, this is the type of people that go to our church, and everyone looks like they have all their lives together, and everyone drives brand new cars and wears clothes that weren't handed down to them by their father or anything. It's that kind of people who go to that church and have all the fancy video screens and the Starbucks in the lobby and the smoke in the mirrors. It's possible and tempting for that type of crowd assumption to be the case. And if a person came in who is different, what would everybody do? Whoa, what's this guy think is coming in here? Come on, don't you want to go somewhere else? Maybe we can help you find somewhere else that might fit you a little better. You know, it's not kind of said outright, but they don't have an interest in welcoming all people, but the master in this story does. Yeah, Cosette.
My mother's name was Roma.
Really? Interesting.
There is a story, but we don't have time.
Well, I look forward to hearing that story later. Yeah. And I'm sure if you were in Eastern Europe and you wanted to start the strongest church you could, that was funded great, then you'd probably want to reach out and give fancy flyers to the folks in the society who had everything was going great, and they were, young professionals with good paying jobs. That's the kind of attractive mission field that often pulls church planters, even in North America. It's remarkable how a lot of church planters are really called to like up and coming yuppie neighborhoods. and that's a terrible thing for me to say. Shame on me for saying it. Every person deserves to hear the gospel. Even like fancy, trendy hipsters absolutely deserve it. But it is remarkable how many people feel called like to the wealthy neighborhoods. But in this story, and I hope in our church and like the McNary's work, they say, well, you know what our master is up to? Our master is up to making it a point to work a little harder and go out and find those people who don't know they're invited, wouldn't think that they're welcome, but we can show that hospitality and say, not only is it fine if you wandered in, we want to go find you so that you know you are invited. So every, this is small and it might not make any difference, but every week for 2 years, when I have posted the link for our online worship service on Facebook, I know that anyone in the world can see that. And so 9 times out of 10, I will type the phrase, "You are invited," so that whoever reads that, they know they're the you. Whoever needs to see that, they are the you, and they are invited to worship.
To tell a quick story,
Mhm.
when my Uncle Tom and Aunt Glenda moved here, they were looking for a church. And they visited several churches, but one that stood out to them that they never darkened the doors again was a large church. And they kept looking for a place to sit. And somebody would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I said this," but would not get up and help them or welcome them. He said they got all the way to the front of the church.
Oh, they had to sit in the front of the church.
They
Ooh.
did, they left.
Ooh, yeah. They had standards. I'm not sitting in the front of the church. Yeah.
They walked out the back door.
Oh, gosh.
And
That-
I would hate for that to be us.
Yes. Hey, you would hope that in any church, if someone came up and said, "Is it okay if I sit here?" that any person would say, "Oh, yeah, you know what? I was going to save it for somebody, but that doesn't matter. I want you to sit there now."
Exactly.
It doesn't matter how many seats I was saving for whoever it is. I want you to sit there now. If I'm, saving seats in a movie theater for my family, nobody's getting those seats but my family. You know what I mean? Or if I'm boarding a Southwest airline, it's every man for himself. It's no holds barred. But when it's church, I want to bend over backwards for people to know, not only can you sit here, but I want you to sit here. I want you to sit next to me. Or, I want you to sit next to this nice person. So that you not only know that it was fine you wandered in, but, is there a prized seat, a great seat? I want to find you a seat next to some great people that I know, so that you can really feel welcome.
I was just recently, as you know, I usually go to church, I'm used to the formality, but I was at All Souls, the Episcopal Church, and it was for All Saints service that night, or late afternoon. And I was was so impressed, I think she's called the dean, but I'm gonna call her a priest.
Yeah.
That sounds better to me.
The Episcopalians have a lot of specific words for all
I
kinds of
think
stuff.
she's
That's
a
fine.
dean,
Yeah.
but anyway, she kept making this big thing about everyone was welcome to receive communion. And even if you wanted to go down and you just wanted the blessing, you could indicate that. And she said it more than once. And I'm still impressed with that welcoming spirit. Not only could you receive communion, but you can just come and get the blessing, however you felt comfortable. I thought that was
That is
very
great.
welcoming.
Yes. I always say, if somebody has the desire to come to church or to worship with our church, then we should do whatever it takes to get them here, to help them know how to participate, help them know what's going on. Dig a hole in the ceiling and lower them down if we have to, like what happened to the friends with the paralyzed friend to hear Jesus, or figure out how to live stream our worship, for goodness sakes. Oh man, whatever we have to do. If someone has a desire to connect with God and the people of God, then we just need to go out in the highways and byways and do whatever we need to do. Yeah. I think I've said before that I've driven around some places and I've passed by churches that I know, and I know their vibe, and I know about them, and I'll see the sign, and their sign will say, "All are welcome," and I'll think, that's not true. That's not true. Most, maybe they could change their sign and say, most are welcome. That would be true, and I would applaud their honesty. And you could, roll the dice, maybe you're in the most, or not. But I always try and caution people, don't say all are welcome if you don't mean it. I mean, you don't put on airs or pretend to be something you're not. Say most are welcomed, or some are welcome, if it's even that strict. Well, let's go back to our story as we conclude. What do you think if one of the original guests, like the guy who had to plow his field, maybe he got done early, and he said, you know what, it's starting to rain, I'll go ahead and call it a day. I'll go to that poor guy's banquet. He's probably begging people to come. I'll go check it out. What do you think he would have thought? I mean, he probably would have been shocked if he would have accepted that original invitation and he walked in and saw the types of people that are eating together at this guy's table. So, that's the challenge, I think, for Christians today, to think about people that we might be surprised to see at a holy banquet, whether it's a holy banquet here on earth in worship, or at the Lord's Supper, or the communion table, or even the holy banquet in heaven when we get there. Would there be people that we would be surprised to see? Now, you don't have to answer this out loud, you can just think about it. What?
They be surprised who's in heaven.
They might be surprised to see us, we don't know. Sure.
Yeah.
But think about, there might be people that we would be shocked and say, they let that guy in there? Oh my goodness. That really is some amazing grace, because I would not have, you know what I mean? So think about some of those folks, whether it's an earthly banquet here or a heavenly banquet. And I think, like people have said earlier, I think this congregation is encouraging and sweet and welcoming of all people to come in and worship. But there still might be people that we would be surprised if we ran into them in heaven. Yes,
I've
what?
got another tiny story
Okay.
to tell.
Oh, good. Close with a good tiny story.
We always had people invited to our house from Sunday school class or whatever. We'd have big picnics and things on the deck when we were living up on the mountain, and the view was really nice. And I can remember Betty Hughes coming in, Jerry Dillingham, and Philip Crow, and Bob M. I mean, there were all kinds of people on the deck. But Betty Hughes came in, and she walked straight to the door and out onto the deck. She said, "Oh, I have died and gone to heaven." And Jerry Dillingham said, "Bet you didn't expect to see all of us here, did you?"
Good.
Oh,
Well, it makes us, wonder about what we sing when we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. And maybe every Christian needs to remind ourselves that's what we sing. Not, what a day of awkward discomfort that will be when we run into those kind of people. But if it will be a day of rejoicing, then let's remind ourselves of that now already while we're here on earth, so we can be ready when we get to heaven, and we can be ready to rejoice. And we can remember verses like Romans 10:13 that says, "Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." Not most people that call on the name of the Lord shall be saved, but it says everyone. And we are called, the Great Commission says, to go, therefore, and make disciples of all people. Not go make disciples of most people, but all people. Well, as we close tonight, I wanted to read from the Prayers of the People devotional guide. And this one was written by Dianne Shane McNary in Proprad, Slovakia. And I don't know if it's Dianne writing or Shane writing, but here's what they say. Several years ago, during a hard time in life, I found that I desperately longed for a structure, handles by which I could know that I was not being tossed about or abandoned. It was then that I found myself repeating the model prayer, the Lord's Prayer, again and again during worship as an act of spiritual desperation. The structure of the Lord's Prayer became for me a way to not fall apart and to not fall away. Because I have the privilege of also leading various congregations, both majority Slovak and majority Roma, I began to include the Lord's Prayer in corporate worship. As I shared my experience through my sermons, I confessed that in dark times, sometimes the soul finds solace in structure and repetition. Embracing and sharing my journey with those that I serve here has been freeing, a healing balm of humility and hope. So, since that was the devotional that Dianne and Shane McNary wrote, it's on February the 5th in this devotional guide, let me close our time tonight by saying the Lord's Prayer, just as the McNarys are doing, maybe even right now across the world in Slovakia. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.